Hello all, Xycerian here. So this week I'm going over my notes for Spider-Woman. She is my third favourite character in the game currently. Very quickly shot up to that, and I'm just going to jump right into this. So let's get started. Assumptions are the same as they always have been. I haven't changed any of these recently, so this is all just based off my non-Android efficiency videos. Feel free to check those out if you want to get these numbers, get the basis for these numbers. Anyway, we are on to the identity. So, for attack and defense, these numbers are very low. We know why, because her actual hero ability triggers and actually adds the same amount of value as she starts with. So, while she may only have one fraud, and she's only getting one resource value from it, by default, each time she triggers this hero ability, she is getting this same value, and same for these other ones as well. Recover's a little bit different. It's the lowest in the game. It's still slightly better. It's still slightly better than defending, but you still have to go into alter ego to trigger it, so it's harder to do. So yeah, there's reasons for that. Hand size, it's the standard 5'6", and the HP is 11. That's not actually 9, that should be a little bit lower. Should be like 8.33. But I don't really put much stock in the HP, the resource value of the HP in general. It doesn't take that long to drain this. And just some important things to note here. This alter ego action is not valuable a lot of the time. Like, generally speaking, looking at the top card of the villain deck doesn't actually give you much information besides what your next boost card is going to be, and you can't adjust that easily. The few cards that can adjust it, like Heimdall, already gave you the option to look at it, so it's not really doing a lot. It does allow you to calculate occasionally if you can afford to flip into hero or not, or if you have to stay in alter ego, or if you can afford to stay in alter ego if that's what you're looking for, but that's very hit and miss. Looking at the top card of the deck in multiplayer can be useful if you're trying to decide who to give a card draw to with Avengers Mansion. I actually think this alter ego action, if you want to get value out of it, like some actual decent value out of it, you're gonna have to grab something that gives you value out of it, and there's only really one option for that currently. More on that later. The hero action, however, adds a ton. Like, I can increase these values from 1 to up to 5. Like, that's the difference of 4 in the fraught value, and 5 is 3.33, I believe. Whatever, it's 5 times. It's 5 times these values, and that's a lot to add for just playing cards that are possibly either at the aspect curve or slightly above the aspect card if they're a particularly good aspect card, or a combo card that happens to be going off in this situation, and that's really strong. Like, it's really hard to justify going for big aspect cards because I'm not able to trigger this as often, and I'm not able to get the high numbers. So like a 4-cost aspect card will take 5 cards. That leaves you in hero form with 0 cards. Assuming you don't have any finesse, like finesse could bring it down to 2, in which case you have 2 cards and you can get like 1 more, and you've got this value once. Whereas if you run a bunch of like 0 and 1 cost cards, you could actually trigger this 4 times, get the value, and stack up those incremental values. And a lot of aspect cards are either are not going to be super above the aspect curve. They're normally at or even below, with like combo potential. So I think it's a really good idea to play into her hero ability, to get full value out of her. And lastly, double agent. Double agent obviously makes deck building weird because you have to balance your 2 aspects, not just have 2 aspects. And you already kind of want to go full aspect cards because of your hero ability. So it's just a really interesting change to the deck building rules for this particular character. It makes for some very unique decks currently. But let's get started on our cards. So first is our signature ally, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is really good, but really expensive. You obviously can't play if you're playing Captain Marvel. I would say it's her second best card in her set. I would put it below Pheromones, even though Pheromones, Pheromones, I know the positive number down here is lower, but Pheromones costs like 60% of the cost, so more on that when we get to Pheromones. But I would say this is her second best card because when you can actually afford to play it, it's probably her best card that she can never get a chance to play. When you can actually afford to play it, you're going to get insane value out of it. Like you're getting 2 fraughts every turn, as well as drawing a card. That's already a very good value just in general with 3 HP. And it's one of the few characters that's actually getting enough value that you're probably actually better off fraughting with her again instead of blocking with her. There's not a lot of characters where it's better to sacrifice them to their stat line. Like there's still cases when you want to do it, particularly if there's a lot of overkill or something going on. But there's not many cases where just in a standard board state you would want to sacrifice to a non-chum block. But I think this is one of them. This 4.3 is actually gained by fraughting for the 3rd time. It would have been 4.2 otherwise. So it's close. It's not like it's insanely better to fraught it to death versus blocking with it, but yeah, that's where we're at with this one. And it's just these cards. This card draw is very strong. Second card in our set is Finesse. This is a resource card, and importantly, unlike Hawkeye, these cards are like an aspect card is just a nothing condition. It's so easy to. Most of your cards are going to be aspect cards. It does mean that it's harder to justify non-aspect cards and cards like Captain Marvel, which is why I think she's hard to play, because your resource base in your hero set is based off playing for aspect cards. Also makes the second Finesse hard to play, but you can justify it. It's going to take 3 turns to pay off, and as a wild resource, it's just going to let you trigger any kickers you want. And an important note with Finesse is you are already 8 of 40 with your for cards that trigger this just out of your hero set. Like, this isn't just paying for all your aspect cards, which honestly you probably have 22 aspect cards, or 20 to 24-ish, I would say most of the time in a Spider-Woman deck. Maybe 18 to 24-ish. Sorry, 18 in the non-hero cards. 18 to 24 in the non-hero cards, which means that you have 26 to 32. And considering Finesse is 2 of these cards that aren't it, and you've already got at least one of them in play, you could legitimately just have your entire deck pretty much being Finesse targets. It's also possible to guarantee value on at least one Finesse by every basic card remaining in play and keeping as many hero cards in play as possible. So that means Captain Marvel has to stay in play, and you just leave yourself with the 3 copies of 3 copies of, I forget the name of it. It's the glide that we're going to get to later. Self-propelled glide. They do have to all have costs in order to fully guarantee it, but like, you don't need to guarantee it. Like, probability wise, it's going to be incredibly unlikely for you to hit all the cards that you don't want all at once. You will hit it occasionally, but you just wait till next turn. You lose your resource generation for 1 turn. It's not a big deal. You just get it next turn instead. Okay, Jessica Drew's apartment. It's just another resource. It can't possibly generate a double resource card. That is a downside of it, but it always triggers an aspect card, so you always have the possibility of getting most of your best hero cards, but also the options of your best aspect cards and getting an extra aspect card trigger because you've pulled another aspect you didn't have previously from the apartment. It's all a lot of things that adds up, but from an efficiency standpoint, like, it's generally going to just be a resource, like a resource or a card you're going to play. I don't think it's very consistently going to be something amazing that you find, but you can't complain about one cost that draws you a card every turn. And it will, because this 5 cards is a lot of cards, and there's only, in her hero set, there's only like 3 cards that actually have to cycle, and then I don't think you wouldn't go too heavy in basic for Jessica Drew, just in general. Partly because of this and the hero ability. Now we get onto the aspect cards. This, I think, is actually the weakest of them. It's Venom Blast. It's 2 for 5 damage. It's okay. 5 damage isn't really a lot. It kills most minions, I guess. It's better than Big Hands. It's better than Haymaker. But, like, it's technically on par, I guess, with Photonic Blast from Captain Marvel, but Photonic Blast draws you a card, and I think that's slightly better than just costing 1 less. Yeah, it's not the best card. It's okay. It's above the aspect curve. It's a generic attack event. There's nothing really to say about this. It gives you some source of damage in your hero set besides your hero ability. So even if you go full into frauding with your hero, or defending with your hero, you'll still be able to get some damage out. It's alright. Attack trait can trigger Yarnborn. Attack trait can... The attack in brackets can trigger Yarnborn. The attack trait can trigger Martial Prowess. Not super exciting in either of those cases, but it's a little bit too expensive to be a super exciting Yarnborn trigger, and it's a little Martial prowess. Martial prowess is only really super exciting if it had a kicker for physical, which it doesn't. Pheromones. This I think is her best card. It's not clearly her best card. Captain Marvel does make a case for itself, but at 3 cost and putting 2 status tokens, effectively reducing the activations by 2, is so silly. I rate that in my calculations. I rate that at 6, which means it's 3 above curve, which means it's actually double its value. Most cards that double their value are ally cards and the double resource cards, and even then, it's only like the best of the best allies. These are just so good. It's so good. This is actually, I think, the reason you don't actually want to run leadership with Spider-Woman is because anytime you see pheromones, you're gonna play it. And then if you play it, and then you don't get the full value out of whatever other leadership card you played. Now, that's not saying I wouldn't play leadership Spider-Woman. I have played Spider-Woman leadership, but like it discourages it a little bit. I think aggression protection is probably the just looking at without looking at aspect cards, looking just at her own hero set, aggression protection justifies itself the most easily. But more on that once we get to the Justice card. So, protection card. This I find is actually kind of situational, because you can only, it's a +2 above curve, which is pretty good, but it requires you to have 3 damage, at least 3 damage on you, so you can get the full +2, and to be able to make value out of the tough. And it gives it to you. You can't give it to an ally, so you can't. So if they have piercing, so say you're playing Crossbones, who will in expert solo will almost always have piercing. You can't do anything about that piercing. So this tough card is gone, and then you lose enough value that it's actually no longer above the aspect curve. And 2 for a healer 3 is or 2 plus the 1 card is not worth it. It's like a healing haymaker. It's like you can play it if it's you need to in like a pinch, but it won't. It's generally not going to be your best play. In that case, that's the case with piercing, of permanent piercing, and that's a problem with this card, which is why I think that aggression and protection, looking just at the hero set, justify itself the most, because these are probably the worst of the 4 cards. In a general case, and if these are the worst of the 4 cards, it means that you're flooding your deck with alternatives to play instead, to still get full value out of your hero ability, which is justified. Anyway, let's get on to the Justice one. So this one's only +1 above the curve, but it's really easy to find free threat to remove. Just really easy. Like the moment a side scheme comes out, you've probably got it, and any alter ego turn, you've got it. Any if you wait 2 turns with a, well, 3 turns, I guess. 3 turns in hero mode, you've got it. There's so many ways that this can trigger, and the fact that it's across schemes in play is nice, but not strictly necessary. A lot of the time it'll just be from the main scheme. It's just like it's a nice easy 1 above curve, but it's also the only aspect card in the hero set that has a cost less than 2. These were all 2 costs, so 3 overall, whereas this is a 1, so 2 overall. And because of that, it's easier to get bigger numbers on your Spider-Woman hero card by playing not Justice. This goes back to the aggression protection thing. It allows you to avoid playing the cards that are generally weaker or more situational. It lets you hit your +4s more consistently, +3s and +4s more consistently, and your pheromones all get full value. And they all just kind of combo together to make for a relatively interesting, just like a relatively interesting, like basic build. Like obviously, once we start actually considering aspect cards, I think you can justify any combination of the two. Anyway, this is the last card, so we'll just quickly go over it. You'll notice I haven't put any values here because this card's value is really hard to tell because it should be entirely evaluated at your current game state. It costs 2, one cost on itself plus the one for the card itself, and like it readies you. But we don't know what your stats are going to be at any given time. We don't know how many aspect cards you've played before this. Now, the worst case scenarios that I can think of where you would play this is you play it after you've used your hero to do something and then you flip to alter ego and recover. That's probably the worst case, and it breaks even with the aspect curve around then. It's effectively 2 cards for very healing. That's, I think, pretty good. I would play that card in. The aerial trait is not used at all. There's only one synergy, which is get over here. It's not a big deal. Maybe if aerial was more useful, then this card would have more value, but the default values on this card are awful, besides that recover play I just mentioned. I say it gets worthwhile after playing 2 plus aspect cards. Is actually, if you're fraughting, you can get away with only 1. But it's a lot better if you can get 2. If you can get 2, your attacking will actually become pretty valuable with this, and once you get more than 2, this becomes an actual pretty good card. And part of the reason I've been talking about part of the reason I've been constantly hammering home that we're looking at the pluses that you get from the hero ability is if you completely ignore that, this card becomes a dead card. At the base values and even at +1s, this card won't do much of anything. So if you're playing a dual aspect deck and every card costs 4, you're not going to be able to play more than 1 of those cards. One of those cards and this. And then if you did that, you could fraught for 4. And so yes, maybe you got a good value on the other card, and let's say it's at the aspect curve, so you have gained value, but you're effectively only hitting like the value that another character would have had. And that makes it harder to justify going for those expensive combos, although you shouldn't completely forget that either, because there are some that are worthwhile. Anyway, I couldn't actually fit everything I wanted to talk about here. Like that stuff there that I was just talking about isn't even on here in my conclusions because there was too much I needed to talk about. Anyway, so let's just get started. 6 combinations of 2 aspects are available. Combinations without Justice have easier access to +4 hero turns because of the cheaper Justice card. That's without even considering the relative value of each of the aspect cards. The cycling cards in this have an insane value. The 16.97 is the highest of any deck that I've actually calculated this for so far. except I think Black Panther, but that's because Wakanda Forever is like the only cycling card, and it's insane value. And Vibranium's not bad either, and the Black Panther will get down to just those cards if you really want. That's a kind of an insane case. I think that's like as high as it's probably ever going to go. And I do like calculating this particular combination, and this isn't that much below it, honestly. And it means that focusing in on your hero set becomes really good if you can, deck thinning, doing some deck thinning shenanigans to the maximum. So these are the minimum costs for stats. So these are assuming that you're paying the absolute minimum and what's plus stat you can get. So you can get +1 for 1 card, +2 for 2 cards. That's basically assuming that you have both your aspects have a 0 cost card and you're able to play both of them right now. It's not easy to do that. 0 cost cards have a tendency to be situational. There is one case where it's not, and that card is amazing in Spider-Woman. Yeah, and then if we want to get to +3, we need to play the Justice card to get us to 4 at a minimum, and if we want to get to +4, that's 7. So that means we are capable of reaching +4 using just the 2 copies of Finesse and the 5 cards that you start with in hero form, which you have to get like the right card, so it's not going to happen like every turn. But the +4 point is, and this also means that if you started in Alter Ego where you would have had 6 cards and you can draw another one with the apartment, you could actually do a +4 turn with a self-propelled glide, and that's actually kind of insane. Like, that's a full value self-propelled glide just because you flip to Alter Ego. That's without any extra shenanigans going on with resource generation. And I think that's valuable. That's like 10 damage. You could remove a huge side scheme and then attack for 5. You could remove a really huge side scheme if you really wanted, like get rid of the MODOK side scheme, so you're not getting +1 acceleration per turn, although I think that's a trap. Specifically for the MODOK, the Doomsday Chair side scheme. Maybe there'll be a future one that it's probably worth removing. And in a multiplayer game, you could just have some really huge side schemes. Okay, so next point I wanted to put here. You're capable of damage, threat removal, and damage prevention, which are the 3 things that you really need to worry about, because it's how you win and 2 ways you lose. But you can't really do all 3 at once, because they all require you to exhaust your character. And they all they all stack up at the same time. So you really want to... the reason I put this here is because I think you really want to... So you probably heard from time to time people talking about, like, you want to know how your deck wins the game. In this particular case, I would also suggest you want to know, with a Spider-Woman deck, what your main operation of Spider-Woman's identity card is for. So what I mean by that is, am I going to use Spider-Woman's basic power to attack as much as possible? And I don't mean all the time. Like, maybe Spider-Woman attacks 80% of the time and thwarts 20% of the time and it just never defends, or maybe you do you attack like you do like 10% attacks, 20% threat removal, and defend all the time in a protection focused deck. Like, that, there are considerations, and there are obviously ways we can adjust this. Like, if we put Indomitable in, like, what if I just defend every time I hit a certain threshold and use an Indomitable, or just defend any time I have Indomitable on the table? Like, that is an option, but it's got to be something you need to consider. And I think considering it at deck building is the time to consider it. And then obviously you'll decide what you need to do each turn. Maybe you weren't actually correct once you actually start playing the deck, and you think it was more focused on damage, but it allows you to know if certain cards are good. Like if you're playing an aggression Spider-Woman and your plan is entirely to remove threat, so you want to use Spider-Woman only to remove threat. So say you're doing aggression protection, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, neither of those aspects are good at threat removal. So if you play those two aspects, you can get a decent amount of defending done with Indomitable. You could take Skilled Strike, which is an amazing card in Spider-Woman, but if you don't take it, if you take it, then you're going to be attacking, and if you're attacking, then you won't be able to remove threat, and you don't have any other threat removal, so you probably want to start looking at other cards to do some threat removal, like Brawn. You'll pay for that, which I wouldn't recommend, and chase them down, but which I also wouldn't recommend. And yeah, that might make your deck stronger. It could also make your deck weaker, like because you're splitting it, splitting what you're capable of doing. Whereas if you focus entirely on threat removal on your hero, so you just say this character is always going to be removing threat. So you don't put in your combat training. You don't put in your you don't put in the combat training. You don't put in the. I'm completely blanking on the other card now. The Skilled Strike, and you just go entirely for threat removal anytime that you can, and you just remove all the threats, deal with side schemes. It's just it's great, right? Get some extra damage prevention in whenever you have an Indomitable up, and you've stacked up a decent number of stats. Sure, it's all good, but that's what I'm talking about here. You need to consider what you're planning on doing with your Spider-Woman ID. Actually, that's what the next point is as well. It's better to focus your hero on one of the damage or threat, threat things, and then use the aspect card for the other. Yeah, you don't even need to focus on the one that you would expect. Like you could play Justice and take like all the Skilled Strikes or something, and not Skilled Strikes, Stealth Strikes, and like do like a Stealth Strike Justice Aggression deck, and put in some like extra attacks from Aggression, and put in Martial Prowess, and do some shenanigans like that. Like that is an option, but and then fraught with your main character, so that you can actually remove threat at a reasonable rate. Maybe put in a Heroic Intuition because you're using it for that. And yeah, it's an option, and I would recommend considering it. One thing, the next thing is resources are lacking for non-aspect cards. It's why Captain Marvel is so difficult to play. She's one of the most expensive cards in the game when it comes to non-aspect cards. Like the only things that cost more are Heimdall and Hercules has a discount on his as an ability. So, but also if you put in like Nick Fury or what else? What else is 4 cost? Well, Heimdall is 5. If you put Heimdall or Nick Fury in, you're just gonna you're not gonna have an easy time playing those cards, because your hero set does not come with resources to pay for them, as opposed to your if you were to play Captain America, Thor, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Iron Man with his 7 hand size is basically a resource hero as well. Like those will all have the capability of playing those cards much easier than Spider-Woman will, because her 2 resources are specifically for aspect cards. And the last note is all aspect cards have an increased value. They're always going to be increasing value by the value of whatever stat you're going to be using, whichever of these stats you're going to be using. But the lower cost cards get more value relatively. It's a similar idea to, say, pheromones versus Captain Marvel being the best card in her set. Like, Captain Marvel has the higher plus value here, but this is twice the cost as opposed to this being just under twice the cost. Because it's 5 versus 4.3. Similar basic idea here. Like, if I play a skilled strike, which is already a plus 2 attack, putting myself to effectively plus 3 because I played a skilled strike, is more value, is adding the 0.67 value. Whereas if I play a combat training and then attack, yes, I'll get that value every turn from combat training, but the hero ability triggering off the card will only be adding a small amount. In fact, in that case, it probably isn't even justifying the cost if it's like the last turn you're ever going to get to attack on this game. Which would be weird, but the only reason which would be weird outside of winning the game that turn because you did that, and any game-winning play, don't care. It doesn't matter about efficiency. We've got the energy breakdown here. It's relatively even, focusing slightly favored towards energy and mental. Yeah, nothing really exciting to talk about here. The mental is so high that it makes Hulk ally more difficult to justify, but it's not actually that bad. I'll go into that in a sec. Energy, nothing triggers off energy at the moment, but the physical will mean that if you're going to go Yarnborn, you're going to need to put a bunch of physical into the deck in order to justify it. The average cost over here on the right, 2.73. So that's the whole set, and it is stupidly expensive. That is actually the highest we've got, highest I've done so far on any character that I've looked at, and that's not a lot of characters at the moment. I did a test run with Captain Marvel, and I've done Hawkeye and Spider-Woman, so we're not talking about like a huge sample size here, but this means that your hero cards cost almost 3 on average. That's pretty high. It's because of all these like 2 cost cards. They're adding most of it because they're like, this is a free, this is a free, this is a free. That's 6 cards that cost 3. These 2 finesses also cost 3, and this costs 5, including the card itself. Like that's a lot, and the cheapest cards are only costing 2, so it's not a lot bringing it down. That's why it's quite high. Oops, accidentally clicked off of that again. That's not what I wanted. Reading view. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're done with the conclusions. Let's go over potential ideas. So these are just some little thoughts that I had for potential shenanigans. So obviously stacking 2 similar themes from different aspects in a solo deck is just a really strong play. I think that is probably where most people's minds went immediately after seeing Spider-Woman. So that's the like getting all the Avengers from aggression and leadership and playing an Avengers focused deck that way. That's the deck where you grab all the allied tech. You grab the allied tech and aggression, which currently is just enraged, but in future we'll also have training camp or whatever it is that comes in the Wasp pack. And grabbing like the leadership cards that just that help with that shenanigan, or buffing up the like you could do like an enraged teamwork thing where one boosts their attack and then one uses their attack without taking consequential. Like there are shenanigans there that work, and if we want to talk about non-leadership aggression combinations, there are very few. You could also do like martial prowess from aggression coupled with the coupled with the attack cards from so the stealth strikes or the momentum shifts from the other two aspects, and like focusing on their attack themes across two aspects, stuff like that. There's some interesting things there. I don't think any of them are super fleshed out at the moment. I actually think with Spider-Woman at the moment, I don't think there's really too many deck archetypes. It's kind of it's pretty much you choose two aspects and you have a relatively set idea what you're going to be going for. There's some variation. There's always variation, but it's not like you're going to be choosing aggression, leadership, and doing a non-ally themed shenanigans. There's gonna be some ally shenanigans going on there, and you're not going to be pulling from protection. You're not going to be pulling from protection, I don't think, without grabbing some copies of Indomitable. It's another example. Like, some of these cards are too good, they select themselves, and they don't, and there's not really a style of deck that they don't justify. Obviously, you can be contrary and not put Indomitable in a protection style deck. Yeah, sure, you just won't get the defense value for dirt cheap. I don't see why you would do it. Besides just challenging yourself, and I don't know if it's I don't see why you would want to do that. Like, it's not like Indomitable is a super powerful card that you're trying to avoid. It's just that in this particular character, it's a very good card that happens to be in that faction. So, even though generally speaking, it's not actually all that amazing. Anyway, back on other potential shenanigans. Call for aid, no leadership allies. That is so if we go call for aid with no leadership allies, it means that for no cost I manage to trigger the hero ability, grab the non-leadership ally, and then I have a target to play the non-leadership ally to get the other +1. Effectively getting +2 for the cost of the non-leadership ally. I think that's something that'll justify itself. I can't get a chance to play it yet because Ant-Man is not yet in my hands. I look forward to that particular shenanigan. The Hulk ally has a really good synergy with the Alter Ego, and that's one of the only cards in the game that actually has a good synergy with the Alter Ego action, because you can actually look at the top card of your deck and be like, I don't want to use Hulk this turn because it's a mental resource, or maybe it's a wild. It's unlikely to be a wild. If you go protection, Med Team is a very strong choice. I have actually tested this one, because it'll just keep Captain Marvel alive. Like 2 copies in any. It's a little expensive, so maybe you don't want to go the full 3, but 2 copies in like any Spider-Woman deck will justify itself most of the time. And anything that's 0 or 1 cost that has hero action or action on it is probably great, because it will get you those really cheap extra value triggers. Obviously, it depends on the how situational the card is, and Skilled Strike is, despite saying interrupt, might as well be one of these cards. And they give so much extra value by triggering your hero ability than just other cards. And the last card I wanted to highlight, which is probably actually the one I'm going to use in my deck today, is Strength in Numbers. Because you get value off of it even if you just cycle the one card. Like, it is a positive value by cycling a single card, exhausting an ally that you weren't able to use this turn. It's kind of silly, and with the really high plus value here for your hero set, because Strength in Numbers focuses in on your cycling cards in your hero set, this will make for a really strong deck idea in general, and it's just a matter of tweaking the rest of the cards to make it work. And that's probably what I'm going to be doing today. And just while we were talking, we got a message from Wolf Apostle here. Enjoying the analysis, interesting stuff. I found she lacked resources without Helicarrier and Queen Carrier, playing Leadership Justice. What's your take on that? Okay, so Leadership and Justice, we'll just go over it at the moment. Leadership and Justice are kind of the two more expensive. They're probably the most expensive of the four aspects. Protection had a dirt cheap showing in the core sets. Aggression used to be more expensive, but it's added a few cheaper cards that are actually pretty good. And that's assuming that you don't just play Relentless Assault and call it a day. So you will lack resources. It is she's an expensive character to play. As mentioned back here, she has a fairly high average cost on a hero set, and she only has cost reductions on the aspect cards. You could definitely make a Leadership Justice deck that doesn't require Helicarrier or Queen Carrier. Anything focusing on Strength in Numbers is going to be able to generate a ton of resources. It's also so that'll be able to generate a ton of resources. Justice, you could go super cheap by just running like Clear the Areas, Spycrafts, Skilled Investigator. I'm trying to think of what else is dirt cheap in Justice. She's a spy, so she can make good use out of Spycraft. She can play it no matter what. And in that case, you can actually probably get these. You'd be able to get the +4 value here on like a 9, which is achievable in Alter Ego. Not great. The biggest problem with Leadership would be, outside of Strength in Numbers, a lot of the 0 and 1 cost Leadership cards are super situational. The Get Ready can only really be played when your ally has at least 1 HP left, and it only really gives you value if it's doing something that needs to be done this turn and can't wait till next. Because you're not actually adding numbers on most of these. And what else? So Get Ready is a 0 cost card. Make the Call. Make the Call does not cost 0. It says 0, but it lies. What else is 0 1 cost? Morale Boost is 1 cost. That's actually... It's always kind of situational. It's actually not a bad card with Spider-Woman, but it's not adding... it doesn't really carry its own weight without combo. But hopefully that answered your question, and I'm actually going to get started on deck building here, which that would have been a good idea to open Tabletop Sim before I started streaming, but I did not think that far ahead. Create. Single player. Marble champs. Okay, just wait for that to load so it doesn't look awful. Yep, so we've gone over all my notes. And now it is time to flick across to Tabletop Sim to build the deck. Ooh, what? Okay, cool. Never mind. Just taking its time to load the this. So we need Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman's 15. We'll need those later, but not quite now. I'm going to be playing. Let's put those away because those are the Ant-Man cards. Not Justice. I'm going to be playing Leadership, Protection. That can go back. That can go back. Yeah. Once again, I don't play with cards I don't own. So, no. There's not going to be any Voltron shenanigans using the Ant-Man cards this week. That'll probably be in 2 weeks' time because I'm expecting to get my Ant-Man pack in the next week or so. Anyway, let's start with the cards that I think are probably the most valuable. Which for me are anything that is 1 cost cyclable and 0 or 1 cost and cyclable. And non-situational. So I can always play Indomitable. And I can always cycle it with its response pretty easily too. Whereas I can only play Expert Defense if I defend. And don't already think I'm going to defend all of it. And I can only play Counterpunch when I defend, and it has this weird timing window where it only it is the +1 until the end of turn, and then you have less cards for next turn, which I'm not a big fan of. It's not the end of the world. There are much worse things you could do, and I'm not a big fan of the power ofs in Spider-Woman, unless you're just trying to fill out a slot or two, because they don't trigger her hero ability. So they basically, if you get double resource, you're also losing a decent, losing some value from a hero ability, so it kind of balances out the value that they're giving you, and it's already kind of situational, and you're not going to be able to have that many of any of these cards. You're not going to have that many of any of your aspect cards. So let's go for, not make the call, that's not what I was looking for. Where's my strength in numbers? So we've got 3 copies of strength in numbers as well. So this is the start of the deck. Is there anything from Rise of Red Skull that's particularly good? Why can't I get up to the top? Not really. I'm probably not going for readying, so Goliath probably isn't the best. Black Knight is valuable as an Avenger, US Agent's valuable as an Avenger, but Black Knight's better. They're all Avengers, okay. Tough status to an ally. Team training, we'll have a look at that. Okay. What do we got? So I might go for Inspiring Presence, because I will always have in hero form, I will always have the Avenger trait, and both the heal and the ready are valuable if I have any ally in play. And it actually generates value here, and we'll see what I can do with the allies that I choose. So I want a Hawkeye. I probably only want Avengers allies. I want a Squirrel Girl because she's cheap. I want... There's only one Avenger in Protection, and I'm just trying to balance the deck a little bit. So I don't go too heavy on leadership cards and then have to come back and try and work it out over here. And... There's the possibility of running Ready for Action. Put tough statuses out, and if I put tough statuses out, then Brother Voodoo can actually be used multiple times for the fraught. It's like 2 for 2, so it's not the best, but that's pretty much the best you can do. Unless I put in some Inspireds, which is not actually the worst idea. Black Widow's not an Avenger. Luke Cage isn't a hero for hire? Weird. I don't expect I'll be defending for full value, so I don't know if I'll go for that, but I might go for a Assault Vest. I've already mentioned 2 copies of Med Team being really good because of how it combos with Captain Marvel. I'm probably going to have to play some rapid responses, I think. So it's better to have Enters Play abilities. So that's Enters Play, Enters Play, Enters Play. Okay. Rapid response being played because it's amazing. So that's why we're going for that. Quinjets. Just a shame that you don't get to get the value off of the Avenger ally down the line. You don't get to trigger the hero ability on that as well. This is just for the strength in numbers combo. I'm trying to get as many Avengers as I can. I think I have space for at least one more Avenger, and I can go 2 if I want, or 2+ if I want. So I can stack my deck a little bit higher if I just am willing to let them cycle a little bit. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What I'm going to do is build 2 rows. So we're even at the moment, just to make it easier for me to count what I'm doing here. We're even at the moment. Quinjet, I don't want to do. I do want to do. I don't want to do Inspiring Presence with my current selection of allies. There's no more Avengers in here. So it's just in leadership. Let's grab Black Knights. Black Knight's piercing occasionally comes up, it's quite handy. I'm going to grab a team training as well. And I want the rapid responses because it's a stupidly powerful card. And I want to have as many copies of it as I can because I just want to constantly keep playing it. I am worried about my allies coming out in the wrong order. And I don't want to take any of these other Avengers currently. Unless I take Goliath. I might take Goliath. It's a pretty good end game. And currently it's looking like I'm going to be thwarting, so I need to get damage from my heroes, and Goliath is a damage character. Okay. I am planning on defending, so I might go for that as well. Let's go for the energy barriers. I've got 2 cards on this side that stay in play permanently. I want to keep my deck roughly even, so maybe I'll get 2 cards over here that also stay in play permanently. That'll even out the deck, so I should be more consistently be able to get plus to 3, plus 2 turns. What else is cheap? I want something cheap, preferably played in hero form, hero action, heal 2 damage, deal 2 damage. I don't know if I'll ever actually have any damage. The rapid responses will keep that up. I've got so much damage prevention in my set, alongside Indomitables and some actual defending. It's probably not worth it. I just may never be damaged. Similar problem with this. Is there anything here that is worthwhile? Another option is I could cut 1 card from each side. And I could put in 2 double resource cards. I think I might do that. The rapid response I cut? No. Yes, I think it's a rapid response I cut. No, maybe I cut Black Knight. Be nice to have a good way to deal with tough. Oh, but I suppose I got Squirrel Girl for that. Let's cut the Black Knight. So I'm back in the same spot I was worried about earlier, where I can't defend. Not fully, but I can't defend against the drawing too many of these allies all at once. I'll have to go for another deck cycle to fully set up. Corfu would have fixed that, but I don't have access to it. Anyway, energy is common. I think physical is more common than double mental. So what I'm trying to do there, I'm trying to select the double resources such that because I don't have any requirement here, I'm trying to select them such that they're more likely to trigger the villain's such that they're more likely to trigger the villain's attachments costs. So you'll note that this isn't particularly cheap with these cards. There's a lot of like 1 cost cards I could play on leadership side that I'm not, because too many of these cards are needed just to try and get the strength in numbers stuff to really function. And these 2 cost cards are really needed to keep it online. but I'm not going too high in the cost besides Goliath, who's only a one, like there's only one copy of him and he should stay in play permanently, using Rapid Response to try and constantly keep him in play. These can be a little situational because you have to constantly cycle one of them in order to get the, in order to keep up, you know, the ability to play it, but it's not super bad. And these all cycle super quickly. These will cycle in a couple turns, but get huge value off of the Captain Marvel and Brother Voodoo's just here to even it out. If I honestly, if I could put in more Avengers from protection, I would, but that's not an option. So let's just group these up and let's set up a game.